Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. The Sensex and the Nifty end with marginal losses. After a range-bound session, the Nifty manages to hold above 25,000. Banks and midcaps see sharper cuts. A trade deal between India and the US before the 1st of August deadline is unlikely. Sources say the deal stalled after the US proposed 20% tariffs on India and expected zero tariffs in return, similar to Indonesia and Vietnam. Access to agri and dairy sectors remain a flashpoint. That's an exclusive. In a sudden move, Anup Saha resigns as the MD of Bajaj Finance with immediate effect. The Vice Chairman Rajiv Jain will assume additional responsibilities. Sources say it's premature to assume Saha's resignation is linked to the top job at IndiaUSA Bank, where he's one of the three contenders. That's another exclusive. AxisBank eyes an additional 10% stake in its life insurance joint venture with Max Financial Services, may seek RBI approval to acquire a stake which will help Max Financial raise 5,000 crore rupees. AxisBank would become the promoter of the company if the deal goes through. Another exclusive this evening. Tilaknagar leads the race to buy the popular whiskey brand Imperial Blue from Pernod Ricard. Sources say the deal is likely to value Imperial Blue at around 4,000 crore rupees. Another exclusive tonight. Vice President Jagdeep Dhankhar surprise resignation with 2 years left in his term on the first day of Parliament session creates a flutter in the corridors of power. Sources say tensions with the government over Dhankhar backing an opposition motion to impeach Justice Verma could have led to his sudden exit. Just 10 days ago, Dhankhar had said he will complete his term barring any, and I quote, divine intervention. The second day of the monsoon session of Parliament is a washout. Opposition parties protest over the voter roll revision in Bihar and the aftermath of the Pahalgam terror attacks. The Supreme Court begins hearing the presidential reference made by Draupadi Murmu, conferring the powers of president and governors, issues notice to the union government and all state governments. Murmu had made the reference following a Supreme Court order that prescribed a timeline of maximum 3 months for the president to consider a bill referred by a state's governor. India startup airlines are struggling to take off. Air Kerala, Al Hind Air and Shank Air neither have any aircraft nor a flying permit. All three airlines got regulatory approval in 2024 and were hoping to take to the skies by the middle of 2025. After 62 years, the Indian Air Force will retire the MiG-21 fighter jets. A ceremonial send-off to the aircraft, dubbed as a workhorse, will be held in September. We do have a packed show lined up for you, but straight to the day's market action. The Sensex and the Nifty closing flat after a range-bound session. Broader markets underperforming, with the midcap slipping over 360 points, so closing 0.5% lower. The Nifty Bank closing 200 points lower. Absolutely flat there, both for the Sensex as well as the Nifty. Shriram Motors, Eicher Motors, Adani Ports dragging the index lower today. Now, market regulator SEBI has granted approval to US-based trading firm Jane Street to resume trading in India. This comes after Jane Street completed the directive to open an escrow account and deposit the unlawful gains of 4,844 crore rupees before the deadline. However, Jane Street will be closely monitored by stock exchanges during the ongoing SEBI probe. Remember, the ban was imposed over Jane Street's alleged market manipulation in the derivatives segment. Now, shares of Zomato's parent Eternal hitting a record high on renewed optimism over its quick commerce business Blinkit. In its first quarter earnings, Blinkit had reported higher order value compared to the food delivery business. Shares of rival Swiggy also jumped nearly 5% in trade today. Eternal's management said growth and margins have bottomed out for the near term. The rally came despite a steep decline in net profit, which came in at 25 crore rupees in the June quarter. However, revenue up 70% to over 7,000 crore rupees. On to more earnings. FMCG giant Colgate has reported a weak set of numbers in the first quarter, missing street estimates across most parameters. Net profit declining nearly 12% to 321 crores. Revenue dipped over 2%. The company's management anticipates a gradual recovery in the second half of the year. The big story this evening, a trade deal between India and the US before the 1st of August deadline is unlikely. Remember, this is a deadline set by President Trump, saying that if you don't comply and put a deal in place by then, well, then you'll be hit by tariffs. Now, sources say the deal stalled after the US proposed 20% tariffs on India and expected zero tariffs in return. This is similar to the deals that the US has done with Indonesia and Vietnam. Parikshit standing by with the exclusive details. So, Parikshit, it doesn't look like there is a deal imminent at this point in time? What seems to be the issue?
Any interim deal between India and US or a mini trade deal before the 1st of August looks unlikely as of now. In fact, the possibility is likely to be ruled out altogether. This is because the talks between India and United States are stalled on certain key issues. Number one, US President Donald Trump has offered a deal to India which is very similar to Indonesia and Vietnam. And India wants a competitive advantage over these countries and not a tariff arrangement on similar lines. Number two, the deal is also stalled because the US government wants to impose a 20% tariff on Indian goods coming into America. On the other hand, they want zero tariff duty treatment in the Indian market for American goods. This is not acceptable to the Indian side because we want the deal to be a win-win and a reciprocal deal. Also, on agriculture and dairy, we believe that the US administration is still pushing for the inclusion of agriculture and dairy items in any kind of trade deal or understanding before the 1st of August. And India will not compromise on these issues. These are red lines in any trade negotiation. Therefore, currently the Indian side has refused to have any further negotiations, at least this month. Talks will continue for a larger bilateral trade agreement. A US team headed by their negotiator Brendan Lynch will be coming to India in August to try and see if there can be a breakthrough in talks with India. For the moment, there is a 10% baseline tariff that the US has imposed on Indian goods, apart from sectoral tariffs on automobiles, on steel and aluminium. It remains to be seen whether the US will impose a 26% reciprocal tariff on India come the 1st of August if a trade deal before that is not agreed upon.
Parikshit, many thanks. Now, in what would bolster India's arsenal, the Army has received the first batch of the Apache fighter helicopters from Boeing. In a post on social media, the Army said the induction of the Apache attack helicopters will significantly boost its operational capabilities. It is the end of an era for the MiG-21 fighter jet. After more than 6 decades in service, the combat aircraft will be formally retired in September with a ceremonial farewell. The aircraft played a vital role in the 1965 Indo-Pak War, the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War, the Kargil conflict of 1999 and the 2019 Balakot airstrikes. The MiG-21 squadron was also alert during Operation Sindoor, so it's a goodbye to the old war horse. The British Royal Navy's F-35B fighter jet, which was stranded in Kerala for over a month, flew out of Thiruvananthapuram airport this morning. The fighter returned to the skies after being repaired by a team of engineers from the UK. The stealth jet was forced to make an emergency landing after a hydraulic fault and power issues forced it to divert from its carrier, the HMS Prince of Wales. The aircraft will now fly to a British aircraft carrier in Australia. The big corporate story: in a sudden move, Anup Saha has resigned as the MD of Bajaj Finance with immediate effect. Sources have said that it is premature to assume that Saha's resignation is linked to the top job at IndiaUSA Bank, where he is one of the contenders. Ritu joins us now with the details. Ritu, Saha is one of the 3 names that the RBI is looking at this point in time, but it would be premature to assume that he does get the top job at IndiaUSA.
Well, our sources indicate it may be too early to assume that Anup Saha resigned from his position as the MD of Bajaj Finance to take over the top job at IndiaUSA Bank. Remember, we were the first to report that Anup Saha is among the 3 candidates who are in the running for the IndiaUSA Bank CEO role. And while his name being in the mix may have had some bearing on internal dynamics at Bajaj Finance, we understand RBI is yet to clear a name for the IndiaUSA role. So the idea that he quit specifically to join IndiaUSA may be a bit premature. But that said, the resignation itself has come as a surprise, given he was being groomed for the position for the last couple of years and only took over as the MD in April, and so him quitting the role in just under 4 months has raised some questions. Equally important is the fact that Bajaj Finances' long-term MD Rajiv Jain is back at the helm, and he's going to serve as the MD for the remainder of his term until March of 2028. Now, while this will provide a smooth transition for Bajaj, the focus will also move to succession planning. Now, remember, Rajiv Jain has spent more than 15 years as the MD of the company, and while RBI rules limit bank CEO terms to 15 years, there is no such cap for NBFC, so technically he can continue, but the company will still be under pressure to groom the next line of leadership. Now, Jeffries points out that Rajiv Jain may now need to pull back from any advisory role at Bajaj Finserve, and Morgan Stanley calls this a setback to the succession plan that the company had been executing. But with Rajiv Jain back in the driver's seat, they say the situation remains manageable.
Thanks very much, Ritu. Another CNBC-TV18 exclusive this evening. AxisBank eyes an additional 10% stake in its life insurance joint venture with Max Financial Services. It may seek RBI approval to acquire stake, which will help Max Financial raise 5,000 crore rupees. AxisBank will become the promoter of the company if the deal goes through. Shares of Tilaknagar Industries rallying in trade today. This after CNBC-TV18 reported that the company is leading the race to acquire Pernod Ricard's whiskey brand Imperial Blue. Sources add the deal is likely to value Imperial Blue at around 4,000 crore rupees. The acquisition is likely to be funded by a mix of debt and equity. As of FY25, the company has a cash balance of 107 crore rupees. Tilaknagar Industries and Pernod Ricard have not responded to CNBC-TV18's query yet. Shares of Titan surging after its subsidiary signed a definitive agreement to acquire 67% stake in UAE-based Damas Jewelry. The deal is valued at $283 million and is expected to be completed by Jan 2026. The acquisition paves the way for Titan to expand into 6 GCC markets, including the UAE, Saudi Arabia and Qatar. The big national story, Vice President Jagdeep Dhankhars' surprise resignation last evening on the very first day of the monsoon session has created a flutter in the corridors of power. Now, Dhankhar still has 2 years left in his term. In a letter addressed to President Murmu, the former Vice President says he will be resigning as Vice President with immediate effect to prioritise healthcare and to abide by medical advice. Sources say tensions with the government over Dhankhar backing an opposition motion to impeach Justice Yashwant Verma over the cash-at-home row could have led to his sudden exit. Dhankhar is the first Vice President in close to 40 years to resign mid-term. Before him, B.V. Giri and R. Venkatraman had resigned as Vice Presidents as well, but only to contest the presidential elections. In a 24-word statement, Prime Minister Modi said, and I quote, Jagdeep Dhankhar ji has got many opportunities to serve our country in various capacities, including as Vice President of India, wishing him good health, end of quote. Opposition leaders raised questions over his surprise resignation. Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge said, and I quote, only he knows the reason. We have nothing to say on this matter. Either the government knows or he knows. It is up to the government to accept his resignation or not, end of quote. Dhankhar's 5-year tenure was originally set to end on August 2077. Just 10 days ago, Dhankhar had also said that he intends to complete his term barring, and I quote, any divine intervention. Take a look.
I will retire at the right time. August 2027. Subject to divine intervention.
हम उनकी अच्छी स्वास्थ्य की कामना तो करते हैं, लेकिन कहीं ना कहीं ऐसा प्रमाण होता है कि केंद्र सरकार और उपराष्ट्रपति के बीच में जो उनका रिश्ता है दोनों के बीच में, वो पहले जैसा नहीं रहा.
Vice President, we wish him the best of health, but a little more elaboration on the circumstances which have led to this decision. Even though it might be a personal decision, but since he holds a public office and there are 146 crore Indians who would be equally interested and invested in knowing the facts, a certain amount of elaboration will help.
दुखद है, दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण है, चौंकाने वाला है. मैं उनसे आग्रह करूंगा वो पुनर्विचार करें.
So Vice President Jagdeep Dhankhar has resigned. His resignation has also been accepted by the government. The Prime Minister has put out a statement commending the contributions of Jagdeep Dhankhar in various positions. But what is the inside story? Is it that the government was upset with him yesterday after he accepted the impeachment motion moved by 65 odd opposition MPs? And did Mr. Dhankhar not keep the government in loop about this particular impeachment motion? Remember, senior ministers like JP Nadda and Kiran Rijiju subsequently did not attend the BAC meeting called by Mr. Dhankhar at 4:30 p.m. Though now Mr. Nadda and Mr. Rijiju both have said that a message was sent to Mr. Dhankhar that they were busy. But this is a surprise series of events. Mr. Dhankhar had just spent about 3 years in this post, and his resignation with immediate effect, which he has written to the president and which has now been accepted, throws open a host of speculations. Was he getting too friendly with the Congress leaders? Was he giving them the extra, benefit? Sometimes, it is a complete change of the situation, because just a few months back, the Congress had moved an impeachment motion against Mr. Jagdeep Dhankhar in December 2024. What changed completely in the next 6 months, where now there is hushed talk in the parliament corridors that he was being soft, maybe on being too friendly with the Congress leaders. He had met Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge at the VP estate some days ago. Arvind Kejriwal he had met at his residence on Sunday. What has really happened remains under wraps, but it is one thing is very, very clear, that Mr. Jagdeep Dhankhar's resignation has come as a surprise and a shock to many, and he is hung his boots just 3 years into his tenure.
Well, that seems to be leading to more speculation on what resulted in that immediate resignation of the Vice President of India, Jagdeep Dhankhar. Proceedings of the monsoon session of Parliament disrupted for the second consecutive day. Both houses were adjourned as opposition members held protests demanding a discussion on the voter roll revision in Bihar. Opposition parties also sought a discussion on Operation Sindoor, President Donald Trump's statement on the ceasefire, and the Air India plane crash in Ahmedabad. Opposition leaders also protested in the Bihar Assembly against the voter list revision, the leaders hitting out at the Prime Minister and Bihar Chief Minister Nitish Kumar for allegedly trying to remove voting rights of the people ahead of the Assembly elections. We will head into a break, but up next, India's startup airlines are struggling to take off. Air Kerala, Al Hind Air and Shank Air neither have any aircraft nor a flying permit. More details when we return. The death toll from the crash of a Bangladesh Air Force jet into a school building in Dhaka has now risen to 31, 25 children there. About 170 have been injured in the incident. As per a statement issued by the Bangladesh Air Force, the training fighter jet experienced a mechanical fault moments after takeoff. Israeli forces continue to pound Gaza. More than 60 Palestinians, including 11 aid workers, have been killed in the last 24 hours. Tanks were seen tearing through the southern and eastern districts of the enclave. The foreign ministers of 25 countries have called for an immediate ceasefire, saying suffering in Gaza has now reached new depths. Ukrainian President Zelensky has said that Russia and Ukraine will hold a new round of peace talks in Istanbul tomorrow. However, Moscow has not commented on the scheduled peace talks. The 2 rounds of peace talks that took place in the city in May and June led to a series of prisoner exchanges. This comes as Russian forces struck 3 Ukrainian cities in overnight attacks, killing a child and wounding at least 24. Geeta Gopinath will step down as the Deputy Managing Director of the IMF in August. In a statement, the IMF has said she will return to Harvard University as a Professor of Economics. IMF's Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said that Geeta Gopinath's replacement will be announced in due course. Gopinath joined the organization in 2019 as its first female chief economist and was elevated to the Deputy Managing Director in 2022. Swedish furniture retailer IKEA has named Patrick Antoni as the CEO of its India operations. Antoni will take over from August this year. He will also take over as country retail manager and chief sustainability manager. Antoni has over 2 decades of experience at IKEA and previously served as deputy CEO of IKEA India. He will replace Suzanne Pulver, who stepped down after 28 years with IKEA. Air India says it's concluded precautionary checks on its fuel switch in all of its Boeing 787 aircraft fleet. The airline has confirmed that no issues were found in the locking mechanism of the switches. Air India said it started the inspections on the 12th of July, a month after the Air India plane crash, and completed it within the prescribed time. Now, India's startup airlines are struggling to take off. 3 carriers, Air Kerala, Al Hind Air and Shank Air, got their regulatory approval from the Civil Aviation Ministry in 2024, and they were hoping to launch by the middle of 2025. But months later, none of them have inducted even a single aircraft, and their air operator certificates remain out of reach. Madhiha is standing by to tell us what's delaying their takeoff. Madhiha.
Well, according to DGCA sources, Air Kerala, Al Hind Air are in the phase 3 of their certification process, where manuals and operational documents are being evaluated. Shank Air, meanwhile, is yet to even submit a formal operational plan. The big roadblock is finding a plane. Until these airlines bring in at least 1 aircraft, they cannot move to phase 4, which is demonstration flights, and ultimately move to the last phase of certification and securing the air operator permit. So why are they struggling to get a plane? Foreign lessors are reluctant sending their aircraft to startups in India, fearing their plane will be stuck here if the airline fails to survive. And this reluctance is due to past disputes involving aircraft repossession and weak enforcement of the Cape Town Convention. The Cape Town Convention, remember, is an international treaty that protects aircraft lessors. It ensures they can quickly take back their planes if an airline defaults or shuts down. Go First's bankruptcy is the recent example where lessors had to move the court to take their aircraft back despite India being a signatory to the Cape Town Convention. A senior official at one of these startups told CNBC-TV18 that lessors are asking for massive deposits, sometimes 12 months of rent upfront or proof that the airline has about 200 crores in the bank. The delay in securing planes is not the only headache. These startups have also hired employees for the key positions like CEO, CFO, head of security, head of safety, pilots, cabin crew. The official told us they're incurring a cost of 1.5 crores a month on salaries and overheads, and there is no clarity when they will start flying. Now, Air Kerala and Al Hind Air had earlier told CNBC-TV18 about starting operations with ATRs that are 70 to 80-seater aircraft and then bring in the narrow-body planes like the A320 or the Boeing 737 MAX to eventually focus on the Gulf routes. These airlines had targeted mid-2025 to commence operations. As the official told us, the AOC process, the Air Operator Certificate process, can't move forward without aircraft, and lessors are reluctant to be the first ones with a new Indian carrier. And with half of 2025 done, will these airlines take off in 2025 at all? That's the big question.
Well, that certainly is the big question, and we don't have the answers just yet. Madhya, many thanks for joining us. Torrential rains and landslides in Himachal and Jammu and Kashmir have claimed at least 4 lives. Over 400 roads were blocked across Himachal, with Mandi district bearing the brunt. The IMD has stated the intensity of the torrential rains across Himachal is beginning to decrease and is expected to stabilize by Wednesday. Now, the Supreme Court has begun hearing a rare presidential reference made by Draupadi Murmu, the President of India, concerning the powers of the President and governors. President Murmu had made the reference following a Supreme Court order that prescribed a timeline of maximum 3 months for the President to consider a bill referred by a state's governor. Ashmit is here with more on the Apex Court's direction to the centre. An unprecedented move, Ashmit. Take us through what the Supreme Court has said.
Well, the Supreme Court is clearly saying that this is a matter which will have sweeping implications across states, and therefore asking for opinions coming in from all states on this matter. Now, it all began with opposition-ruled states, the likes of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Punjab, raising the question before the Supreme Court in multiple petitions against their respective governors, saying that these governors are blocking state legislation by sitting on bills indefinitely. Taking note of these matters, in one particular case involving the state of Tamil Nadu, the Supreme Court had given a sweeping judgment whereby it directed the governor as well as the President of India to decide on these deferred bills in no more than 3 months. That's a 3-month deadline that the Supreme Court has prescribed. Now, that is what led to a big backlash. In fact, the now former Vice President Jagdeep Dhankhar had slammed this decision by the Apex Court, at one point even referring to the special powers under which the Supreme Court had acted, calling it a nuclear missile against democratic forces. So that was the nature of backlash that the Supreme Court had seen. And then subsequently, we saw President Draupadi Murmu make a presidential reference to the Supreme Court, which is basically in the nature of asking the Supreme Court on an issue of a complex legal issue was raised. A number of questions. It all boils down to whether or not the Supreme Court can issue such a direction, can give a deadline to the President of India. That's the question that the Apex Court is dealing with. Now, a bench usually of no less than 5 judges hears such presidential references. Today was no different. A bench headed by the Chief Justice of India, Justice Gawai, he took charge of this matter. He's issued notice to all the states, asked them to come back with their response. The next hearing in this case will be next week on July 29th.
Ashmit, many thanks for joining us. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC-TV18. Stay tuned. We're back in a moment with more.